that strengthens you. So if you just click on the link, or you can also scan that QR code, but I think the link is easier. And then you will probably, if it works in the way I planned it, you'll be forwarded to that website, and I would just like you to answer the question.
Please repeat the link.
The link is in the chat. Okay, I think you can probably all see what I'm now sharing on the screen. This is your answers. And the bigger it is printed, the more often it has been, the answer has been given. So in the center, short seems to be quite important, and faith and focused and clear. And what I think, what I see is all ages can understand, children can understand, simple for 6-year-old and 60-year-old. So I think that's mainly a question of seeing who is listening to you, and also of the question of language. Simple thought and focus on Jesus, thought-provoking, inspiring, truthful, Christ-centered. So I think that's more the question of content, and both is important. So you could just have a short look at it. Yeah, what does a diversion need for all that? A diversion should have a certain content, but it doesn't have to be incredibly original. So, in my opinion, it's more important to that the people who are listening to you that they realize what you stand behind what you're saying. Then that you have the ultimate message that no one before heard. So, on the contrary, sometimes it's good when people hear something where they have the feeling that they already experienced it and know that it could be important for their life. One very simple practice for that is imagine a 6-year-old child is coming to you and asks you, "Why do you believe in Jesus?" What do you answer? Just take a moment and think about that, and then perhaps you can share some of these answers, because I think that's the question that makes it necessary to focus on a simple language and a simple message, and at the same time, it's very authentic. So, what do you answer if a 6-year-old child is coming to you and asks you, "Why do you believe in Jesus?" Is there anyone who would like to share your first thought or idea? And of course, there's no right or wrong. It's just having an idea of an answer.
He always listens.
Mm-hmm.
He gives me everlasting life.
Jesus loves me.
I can talk with him and he hears me, everything, all my problems.
He is merciful.
He's always present.
Sorry, I'm still with the first question. One word. To me, that is faith.
Faith. I think that's one of the main points. Yeah.
I would say Jesus makes life more sweeter than ice cream.
That's cool. Yeah, thank you very much for these thoughts. I think all of them have been very, very focused. Although I'm sure every one of us could speak much longer about our personal experiences with God and with Jesus. So this question makes it necessary to think about what is the core of the message. And yeah, it's sorry. Yeah, it's very, very, very short, very focused, and that's what makes it, makes this answer so well for little children. And of course, very often there was an I or me, and I think that is what is very important. If I'm talking about why I believe in Jesus, the answer shows that it has something to do with me, with the relationship. So when it's not helpful to give general answers about theological theories about the Trinity or Jesus as the Son of God, that's all interesting, but it's not the answer to that question. So that question is, why do you believe in Jesus? And all these answers that you gave have been very, very personal. I think that is important when we're preparing a devotion or a sermon. General information is nice, but if you want the people to feel that you're standing behind your words, it needs to be authentic. A devotion needs something to think about. Devotion is short. 5 to 6 minutes, in my opinion, are enough, sometimes even shorter. I think a 3-minute devotion can also be quite good. I prefer rather so short that at the end the people think that could have been longer, than that someone doesn't find the end and people are waiting for the Amen and it's not coming. Devotion is something to think about. You don't need to say everything about a certain topic. Even in sermons, it's the same. When I'm preaching about a Bible text, I have to focus. I don't have to say everything that is inside. Especially after 6 years, I have the chance to preach about the text again. But it's also just a question of concentration and of length. And yeah, so limit yourself to one Bible word, to one example, one story, one picture, one song, whatever you use for that devotion. For some topics, it's easy to find 3 stories that explain it, but one story that is well told is enough, I think. So it's better to choose well than to get lost. And it's good to ask yourself beforehand, what do I want to give to the listeners? We'll come back to that later too. Devotion needs something descriptive or illustrative. That can be very different. That you can talk about a song, you can even tell a joke, you can show something, I don't know, when you're preaching about candles or whatever, it helps to illustrate your message. You can tell stories, whatever. If we think about how our brain functions, our brain thinks in pictures. When you're thinking about apples, for example, you'll have the picture of an apple in your brain. You will probably not have the written word apple on your mind, and you will not have an encyclopedia article about apples, but you had that picture in your mind of an apple that looks nice and that you want to eat. And it's the same with the devotion. Our brain thinks in pictures. So the more theoretical a text is about Jesus or whatever, the more difficult is it to let it arrive in the brains of the people who are listening to us. And the more you speak in pictures, the easier it is. That's why it's very often much easier to talk about gospel texts than about I don't know, to the Romans, because that is quite theoretical in many ways. And the Gospels, there you have a story, there you have movement, there you have persons. It's much easier from a practical point of view. So everything that you can use to illustrate things is helpful. The brain thinks in pictures. A devotion needs something from life and for life. So it's not a theory about God and Trinity and the relationship between God and Jesus or whatever, but it has to do with life, with the life of the people who are listening to you, but also with your own life. I think it's always good to be personal, but not to be private. So the answers that you have given to the question, why do you believe in Jesus? They were very personal. One could, with every answer, one could hear that it's you who is talking. It's good not to be too private. So there are some. I already heard some sermons from colleagues of mine who, for example, told on a Sunday from the pulpit what their daughter had done the week before or what she had said at the breakfast table. And the daughter wanted, of course, to run out of the church because she didn't want to be mentioned in her father's sermon. So that is an example for being too private. So be personal so that people experience it's a message that comes from your heart, but you don't have to bring too many examples from your very private life. On the other hand side, one always has to remember a devotion is not about you, but about God. So both aspects have to be inside. And the aspect of telling something about God is, of course, much more important. But yeah, it's good to combine this. A message about God that comes from your heart, where people experience it's trustful because it makes your life easier and it helps you in your life. So the text, the listeners, and I. It's kind of a triangle. So of course you always have a Bible text, which may be shorter or longer. Sometimes it's only one verse or half a verse. That's one part of what is important for the devotion. Then I, as a person, play a role. What I said, be authentic. And the listeners, they are also very important. And it's good when you're preparing a devotion to have them in mind, to think about some people who might listen to that. So if you don't think about the listeners, and you only have the text and yourself as the person, it might happen that you're telling something that is incredibly interesting for you, and which is incredibly true about God, but doesn't touch the questions that the listeners have, because it has no connection to their life. If you leave yourself as a person out, then you have the Bible text and you can say a lot about it. And maybe it's even connected to the experience of the people who are listening to you. But it will be difficult if they don't hear that it's your message. And of course, if you don't think about the text when you're preparing it, when you're not thinking about what this text says about God, then you just have a nice text about the situation of people and about why it is important for yourself, but it's not a message about God. So all these three aspects have to be mentioned, and you have to think about them when you prepare that devotion. Some helpful steps when you prepare. You pray. A prayer, of course, does not replace good preparation. It's still work. It's not enough to pray and ask the Spirit to help you, and then as a pastor, go to church on Sunday and say whatever you have not prepared. Sometimes when you're lucky, that works. Sometimes it just doesn't work. And then people will see that you have not prepared properly. Prayer does not replace good preparation, but it focuses the thoughts on the fact that the devotion is not about you, not about us. It focuses our thoughts on God, and prayer shows us and reminds us that we are not alone when we are preparing. So we can rely on that God will send His Spirit to help us when we are doing this work. So I think every preparation should start with prayer. Then you need to choose a theme. And that means don't start too late. So it's better to start earlier than too late. Make a note when you think of something and ask yourself about everything you see and experience. What does it have to do with something that could be a topic for the devotion? In general, there are three ways to find a theme for a devotion. First one is you let it be to be fine. So that means you use, for example, a Bible verse or the watchword of the day, or the sermon text for the Sunday. So for us as pastors, it's quite easy because we have a suggested sermon text that we should use on a Sunday. When you're preparing a devotion, there are more possibilities. You may also think about what has been on your mind and addressed you lately. Was there a spiritual question, a question of faith that came very often during the last days? Is that something that you're thinking about? That's a question for you or a topic. And of course, the third way could be to ask yourself which topic could be on the agenda for the listeners right now, if you know who will be sitting in front of you and who's listening to your devotion. That might be, for example, the case when you're preparing a devotion, I don't know, for congregational council where you have to deal with a specific topic. Then you could think about which Bible text could help us to deal with this topic. Or when I'm having a devotion in the old age home, which is not possible at the moment, but I hope after some time it will be possible again. When you're preparing a devotion for the old age home, I find it important to ask myself, what could be on the agenda for those people who are going to sit there in front of me? Or when I'm preparing a sermon on the Sunday where we have our AGM, it's helpful to preach about church and congregation and fellowship and how people work together. So like this, topics that could be on the agenda for the people who are going to listen to you. And sometimes finding a theme for the devotion is a combination of these three. So you find a Bible word that fits to something that is on the agenda. Or the watchword of the day reminds you of a topic that has been with you for some days. Or the topic that is on the agenda for the listeners is also yours, and you've been dealing with it and thinking about it for a certain time. So you're not forced to take a certain topic, but it's helpful to to know about different ways to find one. And then you have to find the core idea. And I think that that is the most difficult task in the preparation, to choose one topic and leave other topics out. So if you are talking, for example, about a Bible text, I don't know, about Jesus feeding the 4,000 people, you can focus on Jesus who's able to do miracles. You can focus on the question how the people may be feeling when they're hungry, and you can talk about physical and spiritual feelings of hunger in our world. You can preach about people bringing a little bit of fish and bread together and sharing, and everyone gets what they need. There are different topics in that text. It's good to choose just one, because otherwise, firstly, it will be probably too long, and secondly, it's just not so focused. It's helpful to formulate the core idea in a short sentence, and short means short, not short like the Apostle Paul in his letters, but really, really short. So I would say a maximum of 12 words. If one is not able to formulate the core idea in a sentence of 12 words, then probably you're not focused on one topic. I do that when I prepare sermons, for example. I give my sermon a headline. I don't tell that to the congregation, but I give the sermon a headline, and once I realize that the headline is not fitting anymore, then I know that I'm going astray from my focus. Then, of course, you need a red thread. Find a good start that makes people want to listen. So then come and talk about the core idea, and do that in a lively way. And be personal, avoid words like one, but rather say I or you. Because it's not about general ideas, but about people and their belief and their faith. If you have the time, and hopefully you have the time, read the devotion again the next day and ask yourself, does it still make sense to me? Sometimes one doesn't have the time. There are weekends when I'm only finished with my sermon on Saturday evening, and then it's difficult to make major changes the next day. But very often I'm done with my sermon on Wednesday morning, because I start on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday afternoon or on Thursday morning I read it again. And sometimes I realize then with a day of distance between that some things or some formulations or some connections don't make much sense anymore to me. Then it's good to change it. And of course, the most important thing, don't worry, because God is with you. That's also one of the core steps when you're preparing a devotion or writing a sermon or whatever. Sometimes maybe you make the experience that whatever you're thinking doesn't make sense to yourself, or you think this task is much too big for me, and I will never be able to do that. Don't worry, you're speaking to God's congregation, and at this moment He needs you for this devotion. He needs you for this message. And he will give you the strength and the thoughts and the ability to say something meaningful. How do I say what I want to say? Or no, perhaps you can have a very short time if there are any questions up to now about what I've tried to explain. Then it should be better to answer them now. No questions. Okay.
I would like to just know what is the purpose of a devotion?
It depends on the context, I would say. I think in general, one purpose is to start whatever is happening in a congregation under God's word, to focus the people on that we are not just people who are meeting because they like each other or because they like to plan a bazaar or to have meetings in the council, but that it's a church event. And I think for that it's always necessary to focus on God. So it's a specific specific focus in the beginning to say whatever we are doing now, we do it because we trust that God is calling us. And of course, sometimes it's also like a starter for a certain topic. As I said, when you're having a devotion before an AGM, for example. So it's and sometimes like when it's a devotion that I do in the old age home, it's just like a service but shorter. So it's still a message. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm asking this question because we, as prayer men, we do devotions on Mondays. Mm-hmm. And those devotions of ours take almost 2 hours.
Wow.
So, yeah, but I understand because I think it leads to a discussion. Most of the time, we do just have one person that has prepared on the sermon text that was delivered on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And then just give us a brief. I think that is the part of the devotion. Just give us a brief in terms of how we interpret it, and then we open it for discussion. And the major part of that session is the discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, I think 2 hours. It's a long time, and it's great if a group of people does that. I think I would say the core of the devotion is the input that one person gives, and then it's just something different but still great if people share their ideas and thoughts and opinions about the biblical topic. Any other questions? Okay.
Pastor Wilko, I just want to say that it is incredible how short and sweet, how simple you helped us with this. This is really helpful for me also. Even if I've done devotions a lot of times, there's some clarity you have given me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I've read your message, and I will answer later. Okay, are there any other questions up to now? Otherwise, I would like to continue. Okay. How do I say what I want to say? Every one of us is used to use language because we just talk. But if you're talking in a specific context or more in a specific position, so if you're the one who is responsible for the diversion and you have a certain role, it's good to reflect on your language and the way you use it, which means speak in a way that people understand you. Think about certain people while you're writing. So that's what I do when I'm preparing a sermon. I always have a few people from the congregation on my mind and ask myself, what do I have to say to speak something into the situation of that confirmant or that elderly lady or this person from the congregational council. It makes it easier to avoid speaking general truth, but speaking for different people. So when I'm preparing a sermon for Sunday, I think about some elderly people and confirmants and try to find a message that is interesting for all of them. And the same when you're preparing a devotion for a group of people that you know, it's good to keep some people in mind, some specific people, not a whole group, but 2 or 3 people, and just ask yourself, will they understand this message? Would it be enriching for their life? Will it give them hope and strength? And if you have the feeling it does, and that applies to different people, then you're on the right way. How to write good? I would like just to share a few things about writing. Of course, when you're preparing a devotion, first of all, it's spoken language at the end. But when you're preparing it, it's still something that you write down. You don't have to write full sentences. Sometimes it's just some keywords. So that depends on how you prefer to work. But at the beginning, it's still writing and not speaking. So some things, some tips how to write good texts is, firstly, avoid alliterations always. So starting all the words with the same letter sounds nice, but it's a bit annoying. Prepositions are not words to end sentences with. When you listen to the sentence and when you read it, you will surely realize why, because it makes it difficult to understand it. And if you are not able, or if the people who are listening to a devotion are not reading it, but can only hear it, it's even more difficult. Prepositions are not words to end sentences with. From the grammar point of view, it makes sense, but from the listener's point of view, it's not helpful. Avoid cliches like the plug. They are old hat. So don't be too general and don't say things that everyone already knows. Parenthetical remarks, however relevant, are unnecessary. It's better to ask yourself, do I need this? Or, so if you don't need it, you can just, you don't have to say it. And if you think it's relevant, it's better to use 2 sentences. Parenthetical remarks might be necessary. Sometimes they are even relevant. It's easier to understand when people listen to that. One should never generalize. I think that's very important, especially for sermons and for diversions. So it's not about general truth, it's about specific truth. Because I'm very convinced that, that what God makes our truth, where we feel it makes sense in our life and it strengthens us and gives us what we need, it's always a specific message. It's always part of a general message, but the gospel is always specific. And when we are preparing a text about a Bible word, for example, it's better to formulate things in a specific way than too general. And of course, if you're talking about groups of people or things like that, it's in most cases it doesn't make sense to generalize. So we don't say the Germans because the Germans are not like that. I'm from northern Germany, and in my region, people don't wear a dirndl. So the Germans don't do that, not all of them. Or the Pharisees are like this. It's a cliche. It's a generalization, and it's really helpful to generalize. Or the disciples, or the Jews, or the Romans. I think it's never a whole group of people who are all the same. And as God speaks into our personal life and always speaks to specific persons in specific situations, I think we should also reflect that when we are talking about persons. One should never generalize. Eliminate quotations. As Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, I hate quotations, tell me what you know. Sometimes it's good to quote someone. Paul, for example, very often quotes passages from the Old Testament. Sometimes it's necessary and helpful to quote, but very often we use quotes to find an authority for our own thoughts. And that's always a bit dangerous because firstly, it says we don't trust our own message because we always need Paul or Bonhoeffer or whoever or Martin Luther to make it stronger. And in most cases, it's not necessary. And secondly, it makes the text more complicated. So if you're really convinced about something, you can just say it. And you don't have to say this and this and this. And like Martin Luther also said, and then you say the same thing with Martin Luther's words. It doesn't make it more senseful, and it doesn't make it more true, just because Martin Luther said it. Don't be redundant. Don't use more words than necessary. It's highly superfluous. So just be short. That's always very helpful. One thing that I personally do when I'm preparing sermons, I try to make the sentences as short as possible, and with every sentence I start a new line on my computer. For me, that's helpful just to get a better overview, but it also helps to prevent that I have sentences like Paul uses them in the letter to the Romans, where sometimes at the end of the sentence you have forgotten how he started. It's better to have short sentences, one thought per sentence, And if you're repeating yourself, just delete it. Be more or less specific. I think that's, yeah, the gospel is a specific message. And so be more or less specific shows that it doesn't make sense. We need to be specific. If we find an example, we don't talk about people in general who make a certain experience, but we talk about one person who has made a certain experience, and in this experience sees God working in his life. So it's good to be specific, because that makes it easier. It makes it easier for the people who are listening to you, because their brain then has a story. And when you have a story in your head and on your mind and in your brain, you can follow it. It makes it alive. Exaggeration is 1 billion times worse than understatement. Just use simple language. You don't have to exaggerate. And the passive voice is to be avoided. Of course, simple sentences, short and easy sentences are better when they are used in an active voice. Who needs rhetorical questions? No one, especially when you ask a rhetorical question, and especially immediately after that give the answer yourself. Sometimes it's a nice rhetorical trick, but in most cases it's just not necessary. Don't repeat yourself or say again what you have said before. Don't repeat yourself or say again what you have said before. I think, yeah, I don't have to explain that. Never tell your reader or your audience that you're going to finish soon. Just do it. I think all of us might have heard speeches when someone has said, now before I'm coming to the end, let me briefly explain this and that. So, and especially when it's a speech that is a little bit longer, which sometimes happens, when sometimes someone says, when the speaker says, before I'm coming to the end, everyone is expecting now that it's going to be the highlight of the speech. And then the attention goes completely down again, because there's something else. So you don't have to tell the people that you're going to finish. When you're done, you're done. So practical things, always use short sentences and one thought per sentence. Before you start, find a headline and check it again when you're finished, like I explained how I do it with my sermons. When you're preparing a longer text, it's even helpful to find a headline for each paragraph, because then you are really focused on what you want to say in these, 30 lines. And then find another headline for the next paragraph. So that helps to give you your text a structure, to give your devotion and your thoughts a structure that has a red thread. In general, be extremely careful about your first sentence. Don't beat around the bush, just start with the content. So sometimes people tend to start their sermon with words like, I think this is a very difficult sermon text. When I thought about it last week, I thought, oh, how shall I preach about it? But then during this week, I got some ideas, and now let me explain them to you. It's a possible way to start a sermon or a diversion, but it's not the best way, because firstly, it starts with a very negative point of view. People think, oh, it's a difficult text. Will I be able to understand it? What kind of thoughts might the preacher have taken out of it? And so it's better to start with what you want to say. You don't have to explain your way to the results that you are going to present. Just start with the results. And the second difficult sentence in a sermon or a diversion is the last one, because there you want to close, and you want to find a sentence where people feel like they can say amen to that. So the first and the last sentence are the one that need the most work, the most important sentences. Are there any questions up to now? So one thing that I didn't mention in that presentation, but which I find very important is sometimes people tend to have their favorite topics or their favorite Bible words. It's good to have topics and Bible words that you find relevant for yourself and for your faith. And it's good to share them, because then it's very personal and very authentic. But the danger is that you always stick to your favorite things. So I think for pastors, for example, it's quite helpful and necessary that we have different sermon texts for each Sunday, and that we don't have to ask ourselves, what do I want to preach about this week? Because then it might happen that in 50% of our sermons, we always have the same ideas, which is firstly boring for the people who are listening to us, and secondly, it reduces the possibilities of the message. So God's word and the faith is not just simple, and it's not only our favorite topic. So it's good to find different things. A friend of mine who is doing pastoral trainings in Germany once said to myself, said to me when we talked about a sermon that I had written, she said, "Kill your darlings," which means there are sentences that I really, really like and that I don't want to delete. And no matter if it makes sense in that context or not, I want to keep them in that text, in that diversion, in that sermon. And she said, "Kill your darlings. You can note them, you can put them into a box for another sermon. You can have a database of nice sentences on your laptop, but you don't have to use everything in that one sermon or that one devotion." Of course, for us as pastors, it's a little bit easier because nearly every Sunday we have the chance to preach, so we don't have to preach our whole experience with the gospel on one Sunday. But it's good to just stop yourself and say, I don't have to tell everything on this occasion. Are there, up to now, are there any questions?
Yes, I would like to ask Pastor Wilko. One of the things is that you said we must not repeat things because we have adults, but if you have a family church and there's children and adults from 6 years to 60 old in your church. We repeat some of your main focus, like 6 times during the whole sermon, so that the 6-year-old can also understand. But now I've discovered what you said, do not repeat things what you've already said. So how do we do that? Do we leave it out, or do we repeat it because we have 6-year-olds in the congregation?
I think thank you for the question. I think, yeah, I think you really mentioned a good point. For some people, it's, especially for children, it's important to repeat things, and that is helpful. So the question should be, why do I do this? What is my intention? So if I do it on purpose to make it easier for people to understand the message, then it's good. If you think about, how do I do it? Where do I do it? In that sermon or in that devotion. If you, I don't know, are preparing a sermon about a Bible text and you have said everything that you wanted to say, and then you think, I think it's not yet long enough. The congregation might be unhappy with the length, so I repeat the same thing with just other words. Then it might become boring. So
Wilko, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still there.
No, Wilko.
Oh.
I think Wilko has developed a connection problem. I think he's going to be back quite soon, I hope. So sorry for that interruption. We hope that Wilko will join us forthwith.
Meantime,
Sorry, I didn't get that, Margriet.
I said, maybe you can answer Dietmar's question.
I'm not sure whether I can.
Meantime.
But Dietmar, there's Wilko back.
I'm sure. Thank you.
sorry, I think my internet broke down for a moment. Chatting just started. I think the generator has just taken over, but there was a little break in it. Okay, was my explanation a bit helpful?
Margriet. Margriet, was it helpful?
Margriet is frozen, so I think that's a connection issue there. Dietmar, do you want to ask your question? Okay, there's Wilko, I think you should continue. Dietmar and Margriet will probably come back at some stage. Wilko's gone again. There's Dietmar back. Now we are again waiting for Wilko.
Yeah, sorry, our internet is also very unstable.
Yeah, yeah. I think for Wilko, it might have to do with the load shedding and the power supply where he is. So we are experiencing the reality of South Africa, but we are still fortunate that we can continue with these kind of things in spite of that reality. Load shedding has started for us just now as well.
Could we do some sharing of
Yes, please
what
do,
has been
Hannah.
meaningful for us?
Maybe let's just say, how do you respond to what has been said till now? Atta, you want to start?
Yes, I think it is very helpful, especially also because he doesn't only speak about devotionals, but also about sermons, because it is so easy to go off in a tangent and you lose your red thread.
Yeah, yeah. I think this thing of having a heading and checking whether you are still within the framework of that heading, that's quite a helpful hint from him.
If I may, I'd just like to get back to the point where it was mentioned that you repeat something because of a young audience and an older audience. I think it'll be helpful to make sure that the sentences are shorter, because I think a young child can follow it if it's a short sentence with one message and not 3 or 4 attached to it. So that might be helpful. Instead of repeating long sentences, keep them very short. And I think that could help. Also for the aged. Thank you.
So, what you are saying, Ernst, is make it memorable. Don't try to repeat it until it is memorized.
That's it.
Formulate it in a way that it hits and people remember it because it hit home, rather than trying to repeat it until they are bored.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments? Let me just see whether there's a message from Wilko. Hallo Wilko. Ja. Ja, bei uns ist es noch okay, aber bei euch nicht. Also, aber ich denke, Leute haben, well, let me speak English because then people can hear what I'm saying. Wilko said that his internet is not working that well. I think, Wilko, you've already given us a lot of food for thought. And if the internet now doesn't cooperate anymore, let us say you have given us enough food for thought, and we'll just conclude here. Yeah, yeah, well. Okay. Thank you very much, Wilko, for what you have said. People have already said it was very worthwhile and very valuable. I've also benefited from it. And I would really appreciate it if you would send your input, your slides, to those who are on the list. I think everybody would like that. Okay. Okay, so I'll let the group know. And again, thank you very much for your presentation and for your time. Thank you. Bye. Okay, so Wilko has promised that he will send out his presentation by email. He just had an exercise to sort of emphasize some of the things that he has presented, but most of the things he has already discussed. I think that is an indication maybe that we should conclude. From the people who are still here, are there questions that I might be able to answer, or issues that you would like to raise? Dietmar. Dietmar, go ahead.
What I have, how much can be a testimony be involved in a... Can you hear me?
Yeah, I put off your video, then we might be able to hear you more clearly.
Can you hear me?
If you put off your video, we might be able to hear you more clearly.
The question what I have is, how much can we involve a personal testimony in a devotion? I know there's not much time, 5 or 6 minutes, but maybe something very personal testimony. Can this be involved in a devotion?
I think yes, definitely. But I think what Wilko said was ensure that your testimony supports the message, and that the testimony is not about you, but about Christ in the end. I've had very moving testimonies that testified to Christ that I can remember. But I've also experienced it that people then talk about, in a sense, how great they are and how strong their faith is. And then it doesn't encourage me. Then it just lets me know I'm not as good as they are. And I don't think that's what we want to transmit.
Thank you.
Any other comments, issues?
Yes. How often or when should one use illustration or graphs with your devotion, with your text?
I think it depends on the audience and on how much the illustration illustrates exactly what you want to say. I think the same applies as Wilko said about stories. The story should bring the focus, and then you should only have that one illustration that really illustrates what you want to say, and not 10 of them. I can remember talks where somebody wanted to get through all the nice illustrations they have found, and then you rush through 2,000 slides in 5 minutes and you don't know what you've seen. And that's not helpful. Okay, I think with that, let's conclude. Again, thank you for your attendance, for the interaction. I think it's very worthwhile for me to to interact with people who are interested and committed. And so I thank you for that. As I said in the first part, we'll send you the program for the coming year, probably 2 in-person and 2 purely online sessions in both South and Southeast and in the inland provinces. We are looking forward to seeing you then, and blessings to you till the end of the year. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that we received your blessings during the presentations now and earlier today. Thank you for leading the presenters in what they shared with us. We ask you that through what we heard, we will be more able to serve your people with your word, with your love. We ask you to bless the Sunday services tomorrow in our congregations and everywhere on the world. We ask for your blessings for our country, for guidance in negotiations about local governments. And we ask for your protection for all our people. To you we commit ourselves, our congregations, and our country. May your blessing be on us, even as we hope in you. Amen. And then may the peace of God be with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and be with you.
Thank you, even
Thank
though
you
it's
very
hot here today was cool.
Yeah. All the
Thank you
best.
very much also for organizing Detlef and all the others. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Everybody.